Welcome back to Echoes of History. Tonight we follow the long, slow road of a medieval pilgrim whose journey begins not with fanfare or banners, but with the small, ordinary gestures of preparation. In the dim light of a single tallow candle, a man bends over a wooden table. His belongings are few: a satchel of rough wool, patched in places, a leather flask, stiff from years of use, a small knife, more for bread than for battle. He ties a length of cord around the satchel's mouth. With hands rough from labor, hands that have turned soil and carried stones, hands that are more accustomed to plow handles than to journeys. Beside him rests a wooden staff, taller than himself, polished smooth where countless fingers have gripped its length. Upon his shoulder he drapes a cloak of faded brown, frayed at the edges, still smelling faintly of smoke from the hearth. The house is silent around him. Outside, the rooster has not yet stirred. The air is heavy with the stillness. That comes just before dawn. His family sleeps, curled beneath blankets. Only the pilgrim moves, his boots soft upon the dirt floor, his breath steady, his heart caught between fear and hope. For the road he is about to take is long, longer than any field he has ever plowed, longer than any boundary he has ever crossed. Yet he believes that each step will carry him closer not only to the holy shrine that waits at journey's end, but to some quiet truth about himself. Healer, settling its weight against his back, and takes the staff in his hand. At the doorway he pauses, glancing once toward the dark shapes of his sleeping kin, and then he steps out into the night. The world beyond is hushed. Mist curls low across the fields, shrouding hedges and barns in pale veils. The dirt road stretches ahead, pale against the darkness, its ruts filled with water that glimmers faintly under the last of the stars. The pilgrim pulls his cloak tighter, his breath clouding in. Chill! Somewhere in the distance a dog barks, its voice muffled, its presence unseen. Otherwise the world belongs to him alone, and to the long, waiting road. He walks. The staff taps against the stones, steady and patient, marking the rhythm of his steps. Birds stir in the hedgerows, feathers rustling as dawn creeps into the sky. A farmer, already awake, passes with oxen, nodding once, his voice too weary for greeting. The pilgrim watches him vanish into the mist, then continues. Spread wide on either side, dark with soil turned and ready for sowing. He smells the damp earth, the faint sweetness of hay stored in barns, the sharp smoke from chimneys where bread will soon bake. By the time the sun lifts above the horizon, he has reached the edge of the first village. The houses are small, their walls of timber and wattle, their thatched roof still dripping with dew. The square is little more than a crossroads, but at its center stands a stone well. The pilgrim approaches, setting his staff aside, lowering the bucket into the cool water below. He drinks, the taste earthy and fresh, then washes his face, the chill clearing the heaviness of night. A few villagers watch him quietly, their eyes curious, some cautious. Pilgrims are not rare, yet each one is different, each carrying with them stories untold, sins unnamed, hopes unspoken. One woman nods and presses a crust of bread into his hand, her gesture silent but kind. He thanks her. Eats as he walks onward. The road winds on. He passes peasants at work in the fields, their bodies bent low over the earth, oxen straining against plows, their calls sharp, their movements steady. Some lift their heads to watch him pass, their faces unreadable, before they bend again to the furrows. Children chase one another along the hedgerows, pausing to stare, whispering and laughing at the sight of his staff, his worn shoes, his dusty cloak. To them he is both ordinary and stray. Like any other, yet walking for reasons they cannot yet imagine. By midday, the sun is warm upon his shoulders. The road widens, flanked now by trees that arch overhead, their branches weaving a roof of shifting leaves. Birds sing high above, and the path beneath his feet is dappled with light and shadow. He walks more slowly here, his breath even, his heart calmer. Each step feels less like labor and more like prayer, a rhythm of body and spirit together. At a clearing, a cross of wood set into the earth, candles burned low at its base. He kneels, resting his staff beside him, bowing his head. His lips move in words too quiet to hear, words carried away by the breeze that stirs the grass. For a moment the world is still. No voices, no footsteps, only the creak of branches, the hum of insects, the distant murmur of a stream. He rises slowly, shoulders his satchel, and steps onward once more. The road is long, but he does not measure it in breaths, in footsteps, in the rhythm of wood striking stone, in the turning of sun across the sky. And though he has barely begun, already the journey feels eternal. The pilgrim continues along the winding road, and with each mile the world shifts subtly, as though reminding him that every journey is stitched together from small changes. One hedge giving way to another, one stream to the next, one face replacing the last. By afternoon the road grows busy. Other travelers appear. A pair. Merchants leading laden mules, their panniers bulging with bolts of cloth and sacks of salt. A mother with 2 children, their steps weary, their voices thin with complaint. A tinker pushing a handcart filled with parts that jangle and clang as he walks. Each nods or murmurs a greeting, each glance passing swiftly, for though the road binds them together for a moment, each traveler carries his own destination. The pilgrim listens to the rhythm of their steps fading behind him, then quicker. As though the road itself urges him forward. Dust rises beneath his boots. The air grows warmer, the cloak upon his shoulders heavy. He passes by fields alive with sound. The creak of oxen straps, the scrape of plowshares, the sharp calls of peasants driving furrows deep into the soil. A shepherd whistles, his flock stirring across the hillside in a white, restless tide. From somewhere unseen drifts the hammering of a smith, steady and loud, shaping iron upon an anvil. These sow, endless labor of the land, are the heartbeat of the world he leaves behind, and yet they accompany him still, as though reminding him that the pilgrimage does not set him apart, but binds him more deeply to all that he has known. Near a bend in the road stands an inn, its thatched roof broad, its wooden signs swaying from iron hinges. Smoke curls from its chimney, carrying the smell of roasting meat. Outside, benches are crowded with travelers, a merchant laughing loudly, his hands slack. Table, a pair of soldiers with spears leaned against the wall, a minstrel plucking softly at a lute, his voice low, weaving fragments of song into the air. The pilgrim pauses, tempted by the sound and smell, but his purse is light, his journey long. Instead, he sits upon a stone by the roadside, pulling bread from his satchel, breaking it carefully, chewing slowly. A stranger joins him, a man dressed in patched wool, his own staff taller than himself, his boots worn thin. They nod. Another, sharing silence as much as bread. After a while the stranger speaks, his voice rough from the road. He has walked 3 weeks already, he says, from a town near the coast, following the same path toward the shrine. His words are not boastful, nor heavy with complaint. They are simple, shaped by the steady patience of distance. The pilgrim listens, offering a crust in return. For a brief time they sit together, 2 figures upon the same stone, their shadows stretching long beneath. Afternoon sun. Then, with no more than a nod, the stranger rises, lifts his staff, and walks on ahead. The pilgrim watches him go, then follows, each step falling once more into rhythm. The path bends into woodland, trees close above, their branches thick, their leaves dimming the light into green twilight. The air is cooler here, damp with moss and earth. Roots twist across the path, and the pilgrim plants his staff firmly to steady each step. The forest is alive with hidden noise of unseen creatures, the creak of branches, the murmur of water trickling somewhere nearby. He walks carefully, for here the road is less certain, and shadows grow long before the sun has set. When at last he emerges, the land opens wide before him. Hills roll gently, patched with fields and meadows. In the distance, A chapel stands upon a rise, its small bell tower just catching the light of the setting sun. He walks toward it, his steps slower now, the day's weariness settling in. By the time he reaches the chapel door, the bell tolls softly, its sound carrying across the quiet fields. A monk greets him, his robe rough, his smile calm. Without words, he leads the pilgrim inside. The chapel is small, its walls bare, its air scented faintly with wax and stone. Candles flicker upon a simple altar. The pilgrim kneels, resting his staff against the bench, bowing his head. His prayer is silent, not shaped in words, but in the long breath he releases in the word. Ease in the stillness that settles into his heart. When he rises, the monk presses a bowl of stew into his hands. The pilgrim eats slowly, gratefully, each bite grounding him once more in the body that must carry the spirit. Later, in the dim dormitory, he lies among other travelers, their breaths heavy, their bodies curled beneath woolen blankets. The sound of rain begins against the roof, steady and soft, like a hand laid gently upon the earth. The pilgrim listens, eyes closed, until the rhythm of water carries him into sleep. Morning comes not with sudden brightness, but with the gradual softening of shadows. The chapel bell rings before the first hint of light, its slow notes echoing through the still air, calling monks and travelers alike from their sleep. The pilgrim rises stiffly from his straw mattress, his cloak heavy with the damp of the night. Around him, other bodies stir, merchants rubbing their eyes, a mother waking her children, a handful of fellow pilgrims stretching sore limbs. The dormitory smells of wool, wax, and rain-soaked boots. Outside, the fields lie wrapped in mist, the horizon hidden, the earth hushed. Monks move silently across the yard, their black robes brushing the stones, their heads bowed as they file toward the chapel. The pilgrim follows them with his eyes but does not join. His path is longer, his prayers already whispered into the night before. He takes bread from the monk who serves at the doorway, thanks him with nod, and eats in slow, deliberate bites, the crust tough, the crumb dense, filling him with steady warmth. He shoulders his satchel, lifts his staff, and steps once more onto the road. The rain has left the path slick, puddles gathering in its ruts, mud clinging to the soles of his boots. Each step pulls at him, yet he moves steadily, the rhythm of staff and breath carrying him onward. The mist curls low across the fields, hiding hedges and barns, softening the world until it feels half-dreamed. A crow caws from a fence post, its wings beating heavy as it takes flight. By mid-morning, the road grows livelier. A caravan approaches, merchants with donkeys laden with sacks and crates, their voices raised in quarrel over pace and price. The pilgrim steps aside, bowing his head as they pass. One merchant glances at him briefly, offering neither greeting nor scorn, only the indifference of one whose mind is on coin. Dust rises in their wake, hanging in the damp air, settling slowly back to earth. Farther along, the pilgrim meets a beggar crouched beside a wayside cross. The man's clothes are little more than rags, his hand stretched outward, his eyes sunken but sharp. The pilgrim pauses, searching his satchel, and finds a small crust of bread. He places it gently in the man's palm. The beggar's fingers close around it as though it were gold, and he whispers words the pilgrim does not fully hear. With a bow of his head, the pilgrim continues, the sound staff against stone steady once more. The road leads him into a forest. Here the air grows still, heavy with damp earth and moss. Shafts of light filter through the canopy, painting the path in patterns of shadow and flame. Birds stir above, their calls sharp in the silence. The pilgrim walks carefully, his staff steadying each step across roots and stones slick with rain. At times he glimpses the flicker of movement in the undergrowth, a deer slipping away, a fox darting across the path, creatures whose lives continue unseen, even as pilgrims pass year after year. At a clearing, a wooden ferry waits by the riverbank, its ropes tied to posts, its planks dark with age. A ferryman leans upon his pole, his cloak patched, his face weathered. For a small coin he guides the pilgrim across the water. The river moves slowly, its surface dark, reflecting the dim sky above. The pilgrim stands silently as the ferry drifts, his staff clutched tight, his eyes on the far. Road climbs again. When they reach it, he steps ashore, nods his thanks and continues, the ferryman already turning to wait for the next traveler. The afternoon brings him to another village. The square bustles, women washing clothes at a trough, children chasing a rag-stuffed ball, a smith hammering steadily at his forge. The pilgrim passes through quietly, pausing only at the well to drink, then moving on, his steps slow but unbroken. Some villagers nod in greeting, others glance at wary eyes. To them he is neither stranger nor friend, but a fleeting shadow along a road that never ceases to carry such figures. By evening, the land opens into rolling hills. From the crest of one, he glimpses distant towers, their outlines faint against the reddening sky. A town lies there, larger than any he has yet passed, its walls strong, its roofs clustered tight. The sight stirs him with both awe and weariness, for though the towers promise shelter, they also remind him of the still ahead. He descends slowly, the last light fading, the staff steady in his hand, the rhythm of his journey unbroken as the road winds on toward the waiting town. As the pilgrim nears the town, the road grows wider, worn deep by countless hooves and wheels. The scent of smoke drifts from beyond the walls, mingling with the faint tang of tanneries and the sharper bite of hearth fires. The last glow of sunset paints the stone towers in gold before fading into shadow. Already tall. Along the gate, their light flickering against iron hinges and heavy wooden doors. He joins a small cluster of travelers waiting to enter. A merchant caravan stands nearby, donkeys restless, their packs creaking under the strain of cloth and grain. A woman shepherds two children, both sleepy, clutching her skirts. A soldier leans against the wall, helm under his arm, his spear planted in the dirt. The guards at the gate eye each new arrival with measured suspicion, their questions brief. Firm, what business, what goods, what coin? When at last it is the pilgrim's turn, he bows his head, lifting his staff to show the carved cross at its top. The guards glance, exchange a look, then wave him through. Pilgrims are not rare, and though their purses are seldom full, their presence is tolerated as part of the rhythm of the age. The town within the walls is alive even at dusk. Lanterns glow in windows, casting patches of gold upon the cobbles. The air hums with sound, murmured. The clang of a smith still at his forge, the laughter spilling from tavern doors. The pilgrim walks slowly, absorbing the press of life around him. Stalls still stand in the market square, though most are half-packed, their owners counting coins or folding cloth by the light of tallow lamps. A boy chases a stray chicken between the boards, laughter following him as he stumbles in pursuit. The smell of food draws the pilgrim toward an inn. Its door stands open, lamplight and smoke spilling. The street. Inside, the room is crowded, merchants hunched over mugs of ale, a pair of travelers trading tales in low voices, a minstrel strumming gently upon a lute. The pilgrim steps carefully to the hearth, warmth washing over him, and lowers himself onto a bench. His purse is light, yet he offers a coin, enough for a bowl of pottage, thick with peas, bits of carrot, a shred or two of meat. He eats slowly, savoring each spoonful as though it were feast enough. Around him, with noise, a dice game scatters across a table, groans and cheers rising with each cast. The minstrel's song grows louder, a tale of battles long past, though his voice carries more weariness than glory. Men shout for ale, women laugh sharply, boots stamp against the planks. Yet through it all, the pilgrim remains still, his staff leaned against the wall, his satchel at his feet, his thoughts already turned toward the road ahead. When the meal is done, he finds a space in the loft above. Straw mattresses lie side by side. The air is heavy with the smell of sweat, leather, and smoke. Travelers murmur in half-sleep, turning upon the rustling straw. The pilgrim lies down, pulling his cloak close. Through the cracks in the roof, he sees a scatter of stars, faint beyond drifting smoke. His body aches, his boots are worn, his feet raw, yet his heart is steady. He dreams not of shrines or miracles, but of the road itself, winding lanes through villages, paths vanishing in, bridges over rivers, hills rising toward distant spires. For the pilgrimage is not only its end, but each step, each breath, each night of rest upon unfamiliar stone. And as he drifts into sleep, the murmur of the tavern below fades into silence, replaced by the steady rhythm of rain against the roof, rain that falls for every traveler, every pilgrim, every soul upon the endless road. The pilgrim wakes before dawn, stirred not by bells or voices, but by the restlessness. Is dark, filled with the soft chorus of snores and the occasional cough, the heavy air smelling of straw, sweat, and damp wool. He shifts quietly, gathering his satchel and staff, careful not to disturb those around him. His boots creak as he laces them, his fingers stiff in the chill. By the time he descends the narrow wooden stairs, the common room below is nearly empty, only a drowsy innkeeper stoking the hearth and a stable boy yawning into his sleeve. Stepping out into the street, Pilgrim finds the town still half asleep. The sky is bruised with the colors of dawn, purple and gray, touched faintly by gold. Smoke drifts lazily from chimneys, the smell of baking bread faint in the air. Dogs nose at the gutters, searching for scraps. A woman carries a pail from the well, her shawl pulled tight against the cold, her breath clouding in the air. Otherwise, the streets lie empty, the silence broken only by his boots against stone. The gate stands open, the guards lean wearily upon their spears, their eyes half shut from a long night's watch. They nod as he passes, recognizing the carved cross upon his staff, and let him through without question. Beyond the walls, the road stretches wide and damp, shining faintly with dew. Mist clings to the fields, rolling like waves across the earth, and the world feels as though it waits, breath held, for the sun to rise. He walks steadily, his steps falling into rhythm with the tap of staff against stone. Birds stirring. The hedgerows, their calls sharp and bright, scattering in sudden bursts of wings as he passes. The road climbs gently, carrying him above the fields until he can see the town behind him, its towers shrinking against the sky, its smoke fading into the pale morning light. Ahead lies only the road, long and winding, flanked by hedges and trees, leading into lands unseen. By mid-morning he encounters other travelers. A group of merchants passes with mules, the beasts laden with jugs of oil. The men's voices rise in quarrel, sharp and weary, as they argue over the pace of their march. They barely glance at the pilgrim as they pass, though one offers a half-smile, more out of habit than warmth. Later, he overtakes a family, parents guiding two small children, their belongings piled into a rickety cart pulled by a single goat. The children stare at him with wide eyes, whispering to each other until the mother hushes them. He lifts his staff slightly in greeting. Nod in return, each step dragging heavy with weariness. At noon, the road bends through farmland. Peasants toil in the fields, their bodies bent low over the earth, their hoes striking the soil in steady rhythm. Oxen strain against plows, their drivers calling sharp commands. The air smells of turned earth, of dung, of sweat. A shepherd sits upon a rock, whistling to his dog as the flock stirs across the hillside. The pilgrim watches quietly, reminded that though he walks far from home, work of life continues the same in every village, in every field, unchanged by his journey. By afternoon, the road leads him into forest. The trees close above, their branches weaving a canopy that dims the light, turning the world green and gold. The air grows cooler, heavy with damp earth and moss. Roots twist across the path, forcing his steps to slow, his staff steadying each stride. The silence is deep here, broken only by the occasional rustle of unseen animals, the Shah. The creak of branches in the breeze. The pilgrim walks carefully, feeling the weight of the woods pressing close. At a crossroads stands a wayside shrine, a wooden cross, weathered by rain, its base strewn with small offerings, stones, flowers, a single wax candle burned nearly to nothing. The pilgrim kneels, resting his staff at his side, bowing his head. His prayer is not spoken aloud, but carried in the long breath he releases, in the stillness of his hands, in the quiet patience of his heart. When he rises, the world seems calmer, the shadows softer, the road less heavy. By evening, the trees thin, and the land opens into rolling hills. The sky burns with the red of sunset, clouds edged in fire, the fields below glowing gold. From the crest of a rise, he sees another monastery in the distance, its walls pale, its roofline simple, its bell tower catching the last light. He feels the ache of the day in his bones, the rawness of his feet, the heaviness of his satchel. Yet, sight of the monastery steadies him. He descends the hill slowly, step by step, the sound of his staff tapping against stone, the rhythm of his pilgrimage carrying him into night. At the gate, a monk greets him, his robe dark, his face calm. Without words, he leads the pilgrim inside. The air within smells of wax and bread, of stone cooled by centuries. The pilgrim is given a bowl of broth, a place by the fire, a pallet of straw among other travelers. He lies down, the warmth easing his limbs, the murmur of monks in prayer drifting faintly through the hall. And as sleep takes him, the rhythm of rain begins once more upon the roof, a sound as steady as the journey itself, endless, patient, unbroken. At first light, the monastery stirs. The bell tolls its slow, measured notes, each strike rolling across the fields, carrying with it a summons that is as old as the walls themselves. Monks move quietly in their black robes, their footsteps soft against the flagstones. Their voices hushed as they pass between chapel and refectory. The pilgrim rises from his straw pallet among the other travelers, his body stiff but his spirit steadier than when he arrived. A simple breakfast waits, dark bread, hard cheese, and a bowl of thin broth. He eats slowly, savoring each bite, not for its richness but for its warmth. Around him, other pilgrims and wanderers murmur their thanks, some crossing themselves, others silent in their hunger. A monk ladles stew with rhythm, never speaking more than a word, yet meeting each gaze with quiet kindness. When the meal is done, the pilgrim bows his head in gratitude, then shoulders his satchel once more, feeling its familiar pull against his back. The road welcomes him again. The morning is cool, mist curling low across the fields, hiding hedgerows and streams in a shifting veil. His staff strikes a steady beat against the stones, each step pulling him farther from the safety of walls and closer to the reach of the road. Birds scatter from the trees as he passes, their wings flashing pale in the dim light. A hare darts across the path, vanishing into the brush before he can fully see it. For a time, the world feels empty but for himself and the sound of his breath. By mid-morning, he comes upon a group of fellow pilgrims, 4 men and a woman, their cloaks patched, their staffs worn smooth. They greet him with nods and quiet words, and together they fall into step, their staffs tapping it. Rhythm, their voices low. Conversation drifts between them, not of wealth or news, but of the road itself, where water is cleanest, where inns will take them cheaply, where a shrine waits at the next village. Their words are plain, practical, but within them lies a quiet solidarity. To walk together, even for a short time, is to share the weight of the journey. The road climbs into hills. From the crest, the land spreads wide, fields patched with crops, small villages huddled at cross, rising in thin curls from chimneys. In the distance, the faint silhouette of a larger town stands, its walls catching the sunlight, its spires pointing heavenward. The group pauses, each gazing upon it with different eyes, some weary, some eager, some anxious of the miles yet to come. The pilgrim breathes deeply, steadying himself, then follows as they descend into the valley below. Along the roadside, a beggar sits wrapped in rags, his hand outstretched. The pilgrims stop one by one, each offering what they can, a crust of bread, a coin, a murmured prayer. When the pilgrim's turn comes, he presses into the man's palm a small piece of dried fruit saved from his last meal. The beggar's eyes brighten, his lips forming words of blessing, though his voice is cracked and faint. The pilgrims continue, their steps quiet, the encounter lingering between them like an unspoken reminder of what it means to walk not only for oneself, but for others. The afternoon grows warm. Dust. Their boots, sweat dampens their cloaks, their mouths dry with thirst. At last they reach a stream winding through a meadow. They kneel to drink, scooping water with cupped hands, the chill biting and sweet. Some wash their faces, others fill their flasks. The pilgrim lingers, watching the water rush over stones, the sunlight flashing across its surface. For a moment he feels the road pause, the noise of the world softened, as though the stream itself were singing to him. By evening they arrive at a village. Its square is small, marked by a well at the center and a chapel whose bell has long since cracked, its silence as heavy as its weight. The villagers watch with cautious eyes as the pilgrims pass, some nodding, some whispering behind their hands. A woman offers them shelter in her barn, a space among the hay where they can rest. They accept with gratitude, sharing their bread, their stories, their silence. As night falls, the barn fills with the sound of slow breathing, the rustle of straw, the faint call of an owl beyond the rafters. The pilgrim lies awake for a while, staring at the wooden beams above, listening to the steady rhythm of the road that beats now not only in his feet but in his heart. Sleep comes slowly, like the drawing of a cloak across the world, and he drifts into dreams of towers glimpsed on distant horizons, of paths that never end, of footsteps echoing forever across the stones of the earth. The morning begins with the smell of hay, faint chill of dew seeping through the wooden boards of the barn. The pilgrim wakes slowly, his cloak wrapped tightly around him, his body sore from the hard ground. Around him, the other pilgrims stir as well, stretching, murmuring, rubbing eyes heavy with sleep. Outside, a rooster crows, its voice sharp, pulling the village into life. The woman who gave them shelter appears at the doorway, a small basket in her hands. Within it lie rough loaves of bread, each still warm, their crusts crackling. She offers them wordlessly, her face lined with years of labor, her eyes both cautious and kind. Each pilgrim bows his head in thanks, taking a loaf or half of one, breaking it carefully. The pilgrim eats slowly, the warmth filling him with steady strength. He presses a whispered blessing toward her, and she nods once before disappearing back into her day. The group leaves the village together, their staffs tapping softly as they cross the square. Children watch from doorways there, eyes wide, whispering and giggling at the sight of the travelers. Dogs bark from behind fences, tails wagging, paws scratching at the dirt. Beyond the last house, the road stretches again into fields bordered by hedges heavy with dew. The sun rises, its pale light spilling across the land, drawing steam from the earth. The road is gentle at first, winding through meadows where cattle graze and peasants work with hoes, their backs bent low, their voices carrying faintly across the open air. They glance at the pilgrims but return quickly to their labor, for the soil demands more than curiosity allows. The pilgrim watches them as he walks, reminded of the life he left behind, the steady rhythm of plow and harvest that others will continue while he takes these steps. As midday approaches, the road enters a wood. The shade is cool, the air damp, the light dim as it filters through leaves that shift in the wind. The pilgrims walk in single file, their voices hushed, their steps careful over roots and stones slick with moss. The forest feels older than the fields, older than the villages. its silence deep, its presence heavy. Now and then, shafts of sunlight break through, painting patches of gold upon the path. Birds stir overhead, their calls sharp and sudden in the stillness. At the heart of the wood stands a small shrine. It is nothing more than a wooden cross, weathered and rough, set into a mound of stones. Around its base are offerings, wilted flowers, smooth pebbles, a clay token shaped into a heart. The pilgrims kneel in turn, resting their staffs against the stones, bowing their heads. Some whisper prayers aloud, others only close their eyes in silence. When the pilgrim's turn comes, he places a single coin at the foot of the cross, its gleam faint in the shifting light. His prayer is not shaped in words, but in the long breath he releases, in the stillness that passes through him as the forest listens. They continue, the road sloping downward, until the sound of water reaches them. A stream runs swiftly across the path, shallow but strong. A wooden bridge spans it, worn and creaking beneath their steps. The pilgrim pauses midway, leaning on the railing, watching the water rush below. It gleams in the sun, flashing silver as it tumbles over rocks. He lingers a moment longer than the rest, then crosses, his staff striking firmly upon the planks. By late afternoon, the trees thin, and the land opens into rolling hills. Wide above, the light golden, the air scented with grass warmed by the sun. From a crest, they see in the distance another town, its walls pale against the fading light, its spires reaching like fingers toward heaven. The sight draws a murmur from the group, some eager, some weary, for the day has stretched long, their feet raw, their cloaks heavy with dust. The road carries them downward, into the valley where the town's gate stands open, torches already lit. Merchants crowd the entrance, their carts laden with grain and cloth, their voices sharp as they argue with guards. Children dart among them, laughing, chasing one another through the dust. The pilgrims move quietly through the press, their staffs lifted to show their purpose, their steps steady. Within the walls, the town is alive. The market square glows with lanterns, stalls still half open, the smell of roasted meat heavy in the air. A minstrel plays a lute upon a corner, his song soft, his voice rising above the noise. The pilgrims pass through slowly, their eyes wide at the press of people, the bustle, the brightness. For some, it is overwhelming, a storm after the stillness of the road. For the pilgrim, it is simply another rhythm, another step in the endless journey. That night they find lodging in a hostel kept for travelers of the road. The hall is crowded, pallets of straw lined close together, the air heavy with the breath of many bodies. The pilgrim lies among them, his satchel at his side, his staff. Against the wall, the murmur of voices drifts above him, blending with the distant toll of the church bell. His body aches, his feet burn, yet his mind rests steady, held by the knowledge that the road stretches still ahead, endless and waiting. Sleep comes slowly, carried on the hum of voices and the faint rustle of straw. And in his dreams the pilgrim walks again, not toward an end, but along the unbroken path itself, each step a prayer, each breath a part of the road's eternal rhythm. Dawn, the town stirs with a noise unlike the silence of fields or the murmur of forest paths. The pilgrim wakes to the sound of carts rattling over cobblestones, merchants shouting their wares, animals braying and stamping as they are led toward the market square. The hostel is alive with movement, travelers gathering their bundles, tightening belts, fastening cloaks. The air is thick with the smell of smoke, sweat, and bread baking in nearby ovens. He joins the stream of people flowing in. Square. There stalls stand in long rows, their awnings stretched against the pale light of morning. Women arrange baskets of vegetables, bright with turnips, onions, and carrots still wet with dew. Butchers hang joints of meat, their knives glinting as they work swiftly, their voices raised to call for buyers. Fishmongers spread their catch upon boards, the air sharp with salt and scales, gulls wheeling overhead, their cries cutting through the clamor. The pilgrim moves slowly, absorbing the storm of life around him. He watches as a cloth merchant unfurls bolts of wool dyed in colors richer than he has ever seen, deep blues, crimson, green as new leaves. Beside him, a cobbler hammers nails into the sole of a boot, his hammer striking rhythm with the hum of the crowd. Children weave between legs and stalls, their laughter bright, their fingers quick as they snatch crumbs or fruit where they can. Dogs bark and chase, their tails wagging, their eyes sharp for scraps. A preach. Upon a small wooden platform, his voice raised above the din. He speaks of sin and salvation, of the dangers of pride, of the road that leads to God's mercy. Some pause to listen, others shake their heads and pass on. The pilgrim stops for a moment, his staff grounded at his feet, his eyes lowered in thought. The preacher's words echo in the air, but it is not words that move him forward again. It is the steady beat of his own journey, the road whispering that there is still more to walk. Bah! Midday, he leaves the market behind. The town's gate rises tall before him, its iron hinges worn by countless hands. Guards stand watch, their spears gleaming, their eyes weary from the endless stream of people. The pilgrim passes through, his crossed-up staff marking him as one of many who have taken the same path. Beyond the walls, the noise fades quickly, swallowed by open air. The road runs straight for a time, bordered by fields of wheat and barley that shift like waves. Farmers move slowly through them, their sickles flashing in the sun, their voices rising in work songs that drift faintly across the distance. The pilgrim breathes deeply, the scent of cut grain rich in his nostrils. His feet ache, but his pace does not falter. Step by step, staff by staff, he moves forward. The afternoon brings him to a crossroads where a wooden post stands, its arms pointing toward distant towns, their names carved deep into the grain. At its base, travelers rest, sharing bread, wine, and laughter. The pilgrim joins them briefly, accepting a crust passed his way, offering in return the last of his own. They trade no names, only stories of the road, how one fared through the forest, where another found shelter in a storm. The talk is easy, fleeting, and when it is done, they part without ceremony, each taking a different path, each bound by his own destination. The pilgrim continues into evening. The sky burns red, clouds edged in fire as, lo, shadows lengthen across the fields, the air cooling, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke from unseen villages. At last he comes upon a small chapel set beside the road, its bell tower crooked, its walls rough with age. A single monk waits at the door, lantern in hand. Without words, he beckons the pilgrim inside. The chapel is quiet, its air thick with the smell of wax and stone. Candles flicker upon the altar, their flames trembling. The pilgrim kneels, laying his staff beside. His forehead bowed low. His prayer is silent, carried not by voice but by the steady beating of his heart, by the rhythm of his breath, by the long miles behind him and the longer miles ahead. When he rises, the monk offers him a bowl of broth and a space upon a pallet of straw. Outside, the night deepens. The chapel walls creak in the wind, the lantern at the door sways upon its hook, and rain begins to fall softly against the roof. Within, the pilgrim lies still, eyes closed. Sound of water. It is the same rain that has fallen on every pilgrim, on every road, in every age, a sound eternal, a rhythm as endless as the journey itself. The rain has passed by dawn, leaving the air cool and clean, the earth dark and heavy with water. The pilgrim rises from his pallet, his cloak damp, his boots stiff with mud from the day before. The chapel is hushed, the monk already at prayer, his voice low, rising and falling like the wind. The pilgrim gathers his satchel, tighten, cord, and with a bow of thanks steps once more onto the waiting road. The path glistens with puddles, the ruts filled with water that reflects the pale sky above. His staff splashes with each step, the sound carrying softly in the stillness. Mist curls low over the fields, wrapping hedgerows in a shifting veil, hiding cottages so that only the faint smoke of their chimneys betrays them. Birds stir upon the branches, their wings scattering droplets, their songs hesitant in the damp morning. By mid-morning, he comes upon another pilgrim walking alone. She is older, her cloak patched many times, her hood pulled low. Her staff is shorter than his, her steps slower, but her face is calm, her eyes steady. They greet one another with a nod, then fall into rhythm together. For a while they speak, of the distance already walked, of the kindness of strangers, of the weariness that clings even in rest. Their words are simple, yet within them lies the bond of the road. No name, no, only the shared weight of miles. At a wayside cross they pause. The woman kneels, her hand brushing the weathered wood, her lips moving in prayer. The pilgrim bows his head beside her, his own words silent, his heart steady. When they rise, they walk together once more, the sound of their staffs like a soft drumbeat upon the stones. By noon, they reach a village set upon a river. Its bridge is narrow, its stones worn smooth, its railings carved with names and marks from countless hands. River moves swift below, its waters dark, carrying branches and foam in its current. Children play upon the bank, their laughter sharp, their feet splashing in the shallows. Women wash clothes upon the stones, their arms strong, their voices rising in song as they work. The pilgrims cross slowly, their eyes drawn to the water's endless motion, as though the river itself were a pilgrim, always moving, never stopping. On the far side, they pause at the well in the square. Villagers gather there, drawing water, trading words, glancing at the strangers with looks that are not unkind but cautious. A boy stares openly, his eyes wide, his hand clutching a crust of bread. The older pilgrim smiles, reaching into her satchel to offer him a fig shriveled and dark. His face brightens as he takes it, and his mother nods in silent thanks. They leave the village quietly, the road climbing again into open fields. The sun breaks through the clouds at last, warm upon their shoulders. Dampness from their cloaks. The land stretches wide, darted with flocks of sheep, their bells tinkling faintly as they graze. Shepherds lean upon their staffs, dogs darting at their command. The pilgrims walk slowly, their feet sore, their bodies heavy, yet the rhythm holds steady. By late afternoon, they reach a crossroads where a tavern stands. Its sign creaks in the breeze, its yard crowded with carts and animals. Merchants gather at the tables outside, their mugs raised, their laughter loud. A fiddler scrapes a tune, his bow sharp, his foot stamping the boards. The older pilgrim lingers at the edge, tempted by warmth and company, but her purse is thin, her journey long. She looks to her companion, and with a shared glance they turn away, choosing instead the quiet of the road. The evening is cool. The sky glows with the last light, the air scented with smoke from distant hearths. They find a small chapel by the roadside, its door open, its single candle burning faint. The monk within offers them bread and straw, no more and no less. They accept with gratitude, lying side by side upon the floor, their staffs crossed above their heads. The night is silent but for the breath of sleepers, the faint crackle of the candle, the whisper of wind through the trees beyond the walls. The pilgrim closes his eyes, the weight of the road pressing into his body, the rhythm of the journey steady in his heart. And as he drifts into sleep, he dreams not of the shrine that waits, but of the endless path itself, winding always forward, carrying him into tomorrow. The morning comes grey and cool, clouds low upon the horizon, the air thick with the promise of rain. The pilgrim rises slowly from the straw, his cloak heavy with the damp of the chapel floor. The older woman stirs beside him, stretching her stiff limbs, her breath clouding faintly in the cold. They share what remains of their bread, chewing in silence, the sound of their teeth sharp in the quiet hall. When the monk appears with a small bowl of thin broth, they bow in thanks, sipping the warmth as though it were feast enough. They step onto the road once more. The path runs narrow between hedgerows, their leaves dripping from the night's dew. Crows perch along the branches, their dark eyes watchful, their calls harsh in the stillness. The pilgrims walk in rhythm, staffs tapping the stones, boots sinking into the mud. Their breath rises in clouds, their cloaks brushing the damp weeds at the roadside. By mid-morning, they pass through a stretch of open heath. The land here feels wide and empty. The grass is bent low beneath the wind, the horizon blurred with mist. No cottages, no fields, no sound but the cry of distant birds. Their steps seem louder in this emptiness, each strike of wood upon earth echoing against the silence. The pilgrim feels the vastness pressing against him, yet finds comfort in it as well, for the road stretches pure and unbroken before him, as for his feet. In the afternoon, the heath gives way to woodland. The air grows darker beneath the branches, the ground uneven with roots and stones. Here the world feels closer, the silence heavier, the shadows deeper. The pilgrims walk cautiously, their voices hushed. The sound of dripping water and rustling leaves their only company. At times they hear movement in the undergrowth, a fox darting away, the crack of a branch beneath unseen hooves. The pilgrim grips his staff tightly, his pace steady, his breath calm. At a clearing they find a rustic shrine, a simple stone cross, its surface worn by rain, moss creeping along its base. At its foot lie offerings, shells, beads, small wooden carvings left by hands that passed long before. The woman kneels first, her forehead pressing against the stone, her lips moving in silent prayer. The pilgrim follows, his fingers brushing the cool surface, his eyes closing. His prayer is not of words but of breath, of surrender, of the long river, of steps that carry him ever forward. They rise and continue. Soon the sound of water reaches them, a stream winding through the wood, its current strong, its surface flashing silver where the light breaks through the branches. A narrow wooden bridge spans it, creaking beneath their weight. The pilgrim pauses midway, leaning against the railing, his eyes drawn to the endless flow. He lingers, listening to the rush, as though the water itself whispers of all who have crossed before. Then he steps onward, his staff striking firmly upon the planks. By evening the trees thin, and the land opens into fields again. Smoke curls upward from a cluster of cottages in the distance, their thatched roofs catching the last of the light. The pilgrims walk slowly now, their bodies heavy with the weight of the day, their boots caked with mud. They reach the village square as the sun sinks, its well glimmering faintly in the dusk. The villagers watch them quietly, their faces cautious but not unkind. A farmer offers them space in his barn. They accept, spreading their cloaks upon the hay, their staffs resting against the beams. The air is warm with the smell of animals, the steady sound of their breath. The woman closes her eyes quickly, her body spent, her face eased into sleep. The pilgrim lies awake longer, staring at the rafters, listening to the slow heartbeat of the barn, the shifting of hay, the murmur of cows, the distant bark of a dog beyond the walls. The road waits for him ever. Dreams. He sees it stretching endlessly through fields and woods, across rivers and hills, always forward, always patient, always steady. And in his sleep, his staff strikes the earth again and again, its rhythm unbroken, carrying him deeper into the silence of the journey. The cock crows before dawn, its cry sharp against the hush of the barn. The pilgrim stirs, brushing hay from his cloak, his body sore but accustomed now to the hard rest of the road. Beside him, the older woman, upright, her breath catching with the stiffness of her bones. They share the last of their bread in silence, then tighten the straps of their satchels, each gesture slow, deliberate, like a ritual that begins every day anew. When they step outside, the air is cool and damp, the ground dark with dew. The village is only just waking, smoke rising thin from chimneys, doors creaking open, dogs stretching and barking into the light. A few faces peer from doorways, children whispering at the The two pilgrims, their eyes wide at the staff and the cloak. The pair nod in greeting, then turn toward the road, their steps carrying them away as the village folds back into its daily rhythm. The morning is gentle. Mist drapes itself over the hedges, the fields hidden in soft veils. Birds stir in the branches, their calls sharp and bright, scattering droplets as they take flight. The road winds slowly upward, each step pulling them higher until the land opens before them. Patchwork. Narrow lanes, smoke rising from cottages that seem no larger than toys from this distance. The pilgrims pause to catch their breath, leaning on their staffs, their eyes drawn to the horizon where the faint outline of towers glimmers through the haze. By midday, the road carries them into open pasture. Shepherds call to their flocks, their voices sharp, their dogs darting in swift circles. Sheep move like waves across the hillside, bells clinking in scattered rhythm. The air smells of grass and wool, of dung and damp stone. The pilgrims walk slowly, their boots brushing the tall weeds, their steps steady but heavy. At a stone wall they pause to rest, sipping from their flasks, the water warm but enough to quench. In the afternoon they reach another town, smaller than the last but busy with life. The market square is filled with stalls, women selling baskets of onions and garlic, butchers calling over cuts of pork, children chasing one another through the dust. The pilgrims move. Carefully among them, pausing at the well to drink, their presence noted with glances that are curious but not hostile. A boy tugs at the woman's cloak, pointing at the scallop shell tied to her satchel, the mark of her pilgrimage. She smiles faintly, places her hand on his head and continues on. The noise of the town fades quickly as they leave its gate behind. The road narrows once more, bordered by hedges and ditches, the light turning golden as the day wanes. They walk in silence. Rhythm of their staffs and the sound of their boots the only music. Crows circle overhead, their shadows wheeling across the fields. The air grows cooler, the sky deepening with streaks of red. By evening they reach a roadside inn. Its sign sways upon iron hooks, its yard crowded with carts and beasts, its windows glowing with lamplight. From within comes the sound of laughter, of mugs clinking, of a lute strummed in hurried rhythm. The woman lingers, tempted by warmth and company, but Pilgrim shakes his head gently. His purse is too light, his journey too long. Together they choose the quieter road. They find shelter at a wayside chapel, its door open, its single candle burning faint at the altar. The monk inside greets them with a nod, pressing into their hands bowls of pottage, thick with peas, thin with water, but warm. They eat slowly, gratefully, the silence around them as steady as the stone walls. When the bowls are empty, they are led to a corner where straw spread. They settle down, their staffs resting at their sides, their cloaks pulled close. Outside, the wind stirs the branches, the night carrying with it the scent of rain. Within, the chapel is still. The pilgrim closes his eyes, the weariness of the day pressing into him like a weight. Yet beneath it runs the steady pulse of the road, unbroken, patient, eternal. And as sleep takes him, he dreams again of paths winding through fields and forests, always forward, always waiting, always calling him on. The rain comes in the night, steady and soft, drumming against the chapel roof like a patient hand upon a drum. By morning the world outside is washed clean, the air cool and sharp, the earth dark with water. The pilgrim rises slowly, stretching limbs stiff with the ache of miles, brushing straw from his cloak. Beside him, the older woman ties her satchel with careful fingers, her breath low, her face pale but steady. Together they bow in thanks to the silent monk who watches. Depart, then step once more onto the shining road. The path is heavy with mud, each step pulling at their boots, each stride slow. Water pools in the ruts, reflecting the pale sky, broken by the sharp strike of staffs as they seek firm ground. The hedges drip with rain, their leaves brushing against the cloaks of the travelers, soaking them anew. Birds dart from branch to branch, shaking droplets into the air, their calls quick and sharp, like laughter against the grey silence. By. They reach a river swollen from the storm. Its current rushes fast, the water brown with soil, carrying branches and foam. A wooden ferry waits at the bank, its planks slick, its ropes creaking with strain. The ferryman, wrapped in a patched cloak, gestures for payment. The pilgrims pool their coins, a few copper pieces clinking together, enough to buy passage. They stand upon the deck as the ferry drifts, the pole pushing against the strong current, the river roaring beneath. The pilgrim grips his staff tightly, his eyes fixed upon the far bank, his heart steady even as the water churns below. On the other side, the road climbs steeply into wooded hills. The climb is slow, their breath heavy, the mud clinging thick to their boots. Trees rise high above, their branches black and dripping, their leaves whispering in the damp wind. The forest is dim, the air cool and close, the light scarce beneath the canopy. Each step echoes in the hush, their staffs striking against stone and root. At times they hear movement in the undergrowth, the snap of twigs, the rustle of unseen creatures, yet the shadows hold them hidden. By afternoon, the path leads them to a clearing. At its center stands a small shrine, a stone figure worn smooth by years of rain, its features faint, its base surrounded by offerings of coins, beads, and flowers left by hands long gone. The pilgrims kneel, resting their staffs, bowing their heads. The older woman's lips move in prayer, her voice too soft to while the pilgrim closes his eyes, his breath slowing, his heart steadying. For a moment, the forest itself seems to pause, the sound of rain upon leaves falling in rhythm with his own quiet prayer. They rise and continue, the road winding upward until at last the trees thin. From the crest of the hill, the land spreads wide before them. Fields stretching far, smoke rising faintly from villages, the horizon blurred with mist. The sun breaks through at last, its light golden, warming drying their cloaks. The pilgrims pause, leaning on their staffs, their eyes drawn to the sight of distant towers faint against the haze. The woman smiles faintly, her face lined with weariness but touched by hope. By evening they reach a hamlet no larger than a handful of cottages. Chickens scatter before them, dogs bark, children stare wide-eyed at the strangers. A farmer, his hands dark with soil, offers them shelter in his barn. They accept with gratitude, bedding down among the smell of animals warm around them. Bread is pressed into their hands, rough and coarse but filling. They eat in silence, the taste of salt and grain steady upon their tongues. Night falls quiet. The barn creaks in the wind, the animals shifting in their stalls, the low hum of life steady in the dark. The pilgrim lies awake, the ache of the day heavy in his body, the road humming still in his heart. Beside him, the older woman breathes slow and steady, her face turned towards sleep. His eyes at last, listening to the rhythm of the night, the wind, the rain, the breath of beasts, and in that rhythm he hears again the endless call of the road, waiting for him with the certainty of dawn. The barn is still when the pilgrim wakes, the faint grey of dawn seeping through the cracks in the timber. The air is cool, heavy with the smell of hay, earth, and the slow warmth of the animals sleeping nearby. He lies still for a moment, listening, the deep, steady breath of cattle, the shuffle of hooves against straw, the distant crow of a rooster pulling the village into day. The older woman stirs beside him, shifting beneath her cloak, her breath sharp as she sits up, her bones stiff from the hard rest. They share a piece of bread offered the night before, chewing in silence, the crust hard, the taste plain but sustaining. When they have eaten, they shoulder their satchels, lift their staffs, and step out into the waking world. The village is stirring. Smoke rises from chimneys, drifting pale into the damp morning air. Women step from their cottages with buckets, heading toward the well at the square center. A dog trots across the dirt road, its tail wagging, its ears pricked at the sight of strangers. Children peer from doorways, wide-eyed, their whispers carrying faintly as the pilgrims pass. A farmer raises a hand in greeting, his face lined with years of labor, his eyes weary but kind. The pilgrims bow their heads in return and move on, their foot carrying them beyond the last house, into the wide stillness of the fields. The road stretches ahead, dark with mud from yesterday's rain, its edges lined with puddles that reflect the pale sky. Their boots sink and pull, each step heavy, their staffs striking steady against the earth. Mist curls low across the fields, blurring the line between soil and sky, hiding hedgerows in its soft veil. Birds stir, their wings scattering droplets as they take flight, their calls sharp against the hush. The pilgrim breathes deeply, his chest filling with the damp air, his spirit steady even as his body strains. By mid-morning, the land begins to rise. The road climbs into rolling hills, the fields giving way to pasture where flocks of sheep graze, their bells ringing softly. Shepherds move among them, cloaks wrapped tight, staffs in hand, their dogs darting quick at their commands. The pilgrims pause to rest upon a low stone wall, sipping water from their flasks, watching the flocks scatter. And gather, scatter and gather, the rhythm of their movement as steady as the road itself. The older woman speaks softly of her own home, far to the east, where hills are steeper, rivers swifter, winters harsher. Her voice carries no complaint, only memory, woven into the endless fabric of the journey. The pilgrim listens, nodding, offering no story of his own. His life, like his prayer, is carried more in silence than in words. The road bends into woodland by noon. The trees rise branches thick, their leaves dripping with the last of the rain. The path beneath is uneven, roots twisting, stones slick. Light filters through in shifting patches, gold and green, flickering upon the pilgrims' cloaks as they pass. The air smells of moss and damp earth, cool and heavy. The forest is alive with hidden sound, the crack of a branch beneath unseen feet, the rush of a stream nearby, the call of birds overhead. The pilgrims walk quietly, their staffs steady, their breath misting in. The cool air. At a crossroads within the wood stands a shrine, a wooden cross bound with iron, its base piled with stones. Upon it hang offerings, strips of cloth tied by passing hands, shells strung on cord, a small carved figure of the Virgin. The pilgrims pause. The older woman kneels, pressing her forehead against the wood, her lips moving in prayer. The pilgrim kneels beside her, resting his staff upon the stones, closing his eyes. His prayer is silent, not formed in words, but of his breath, in the stillness of his body, in the long patience of the road. They rise and continue, the forest slowly thinning, the trees giving way to open land once more. From the crest of a hill, the land spreads wide before them. Fields of wheat bending in the wind, cottages huddled near streams, smoke curling faint from their roofs. In the distance, faint against the haze, towers rise, spires reaching upward, the promise of a larger town ahead. The sight stirs them both, weary though. They are, their bodies aching, their boots heavy with mud. They lean on their staffs, catching their breath, then begin the slow descent. By late afternoon, they reach the town's gate. Merchants crowd the entrance, their carts laden with goods, their voices sharp as they argue with guards. Animals bray and stamp, children dart through the dust, women shout to be heard above the noise. The pilgrims wait their turn, quiet, their heads bowed, their staffs lifted to show the mark of their purpose. The guards glance at the scallop shells tied to their satchels and wave them through, their eyes already turning to the next arrival. Inside, the town is alive with noise and movement. The market square hums with life, stalls heavy with fruit and grain, cloth bright with dyes, fish spread upon boards, the air sharp with their scent. Butchers call over their cuts of meat, bakers shout the price of fresh loaves, children laugh as they chase one another through the throng. Dogs bark, carts rattle. Bells ring faintly from a church nearby. The pilgrims move carefully through it, their eyes wide, their steps slow. They pause at the well to drink, the water cool, the taste sharp, then continue on, seeking shelter. They find it at a hostel kept for travelers, a hall crowded with straw pallets, the air heavy with smoke and the murmur of voices. A bowl of pottage is pressed into their hands, thick with peas, thin with broth, but warm and filling. They eat slowly, gratefully, their bodies easing, as the warmth settles into their bones. Later they lie down among the others, their staffs at their sides, their satchels beneath their heads. Night settles slowly. The murmur of voices fades, replaced by the steady rhythm of breath, the creak of timbers, the faint toll of the church bell in the distance. The pilgrim closes his eyes, his body weary but his spirit steady, carried not by the promise of arrival but by the endless rhythm of the road itself. And in his sleep, the road stretches on, unbroken, eternal, carrying him forward step by step into the waiting dark. The church bell tolls faintly in the grey before dawn, its sound rising above the hush of the town, rolling out over streets still damp with dew. The pilgrim stirs among the straw pallets, brushing crumbs of husk from his cloak, his body stiff with the familiar ache of the road. Around him, other travellers shift and yawn, a merchant fastening his belt, a boy rubbing his eyes, a woman gathering her children with words. The hostel is heavy with the scent of smoke and sweat, the air close, yet alive with the restless breath of those preparing once more to scatter along the many roads that branch from this place. The pilgrim rises quietly, tightening the strap of his satchel, gripping the polished wood of his staff. Beside him, the older woman prepares as well, her hands slower now, the weariness of distance settling into her bones. They nod to one another, an unspoken promise of companionship, and step out into the still dark streets. The town is quieter now, its market empty, its stalls folded, its cobbles glistening faintly with moisture. Dogs nose at gutters, cats prowl along rooftops, a single cart rattles slowly toward the gate. The smell of baking bread drifts faintly from ovens, sharp and warm against the cool air. As they pass, a window opens, and a woman throws slops into the street, the splash dark upon the stones, then shutters it closed again without a gulp. Guards lean upon their spears, their eyes heavy with sleep, their faces pale in the dim light. The pilgrims bow their heads, lifting their staffs, and are waved through without question. Beyond the walls, the road stretches wide, dark with night's damp, the mist curling low over fields, the horizon hidden. They walk steadily, their staffs tapping softly, their boots striking the earth with patient rhythm. The air is cool, their breath rising in clouds, the sound of crows sharp above them. Gradually, the mist thins, the first pale light creeping into the sky, painting the hedges with silver. The road carries them past orchards heavy with dew, past cottages where smoke curls upward, past fields where oxen are already yoked, their breath steaming in the chill. By mid-morning they reach a crossroads where a small inn squats beside the road, its sign swaying, its roof dark with age. Travelers gather outside, merchants with mules, a soldier sharpening his blade, a mince. Idly upon a lute, the pilgrims pause upon a bench, untying their satchels, breaking bread together. The older woman chews slowly, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, her face calm despite the deep lines of weariness. The minstrel plucks a softer tune, and for a moment the noise of the world fades, the road holding them in quiet company. When they rise, the road narrows, winding into meadows where cows graze, their bells chiming faintly, their tails swishing at flies. Farmers move among, their voices carrying in calls and laughter, their scythes flashing in the sun. Children chase one another along the hedges, their feet quick, their laughter sharp, pausing only to gape at the strangers with staffs and cloaks. The pilgrims walk slowly, the rhythm of the land folding into their steps, the sound of the bells and the laughter lingering in the air. By afternoon, the path enters woodland once more. The air cools beneath the branches, the light dimming, the ground soft with leaves and moss. They walk carefully, their staffs steady against roots and stones, their voices hushed in the heavy stillness. The forest hums with hidden life, the crack of a twig beneath unseen feet, the rustle of wings overhead, the sharp call of a jay. At times, the silence feels so complete that even their breathing seems too loud, their footsteps too sharp. At a clearing, they find a shrine, this one of stone, its surface carved faintly with figures worn by years of weather. Around its base lie offerings, a string of beads, a candle burned to a stub, a wooden carving of a fish. The pilgrims kneel, resting their staffs, bowing their heads. The older woman whispers a prayer, her voice thin but steady. The pilgrim closes his eyes, the silence filling him, the road itself seeming to pause in reverence. They rise and continue, the forest thinning as the day wanes. The sky glows with the red of sunset, the air cooling, the scent of wood smoke drifting from unseen hearths. From the crest of a hill they see a village below, its cottages huddled close, its church spire catching the last of the light. The sight brings a soft exhale from the woman, her face eased by the promise of rest. As they descend, dogs bark, children run to the roadside, villagers watch with cautious eyes. A farmer offers them straw in his barn, bread from his table, and water from his well. They accept with bowed heads, settling once more among the hay, their staffs resting close, their bodies heavy with weariness. The night deepens, the barn creaks in the wind, the animals shifting in their stalls. The pilgrim lies awake a while, staring at the beams, the sound of rain beginning faintly against the roof. It is a sound he has come to know, a sound that belongs to the road as much as the staff in his hand, as much as the breath in his lungs. And as sleep takes him, he hears again the unbroken rhythm of the journey, endless, patient, eternal. The rooster crows sharp and insistent, its cry cutting through the damp stillness of dawn. The pilgrim stirs upon the straw, his cloak heavy with the weight of dew, his body stiff from sleep. Around him, the barn is alive with quiet movement, the snort of oxen, the shuffle of hooves, the rustle of hay as a hen scratches near the door. Beside him, the older woman rises slowly, her hands trembling as she ties the cord of her satchel, her face pale but calm. Together they chew the last of their bread, drinking cool water from the farmer's well. Mourning heavy with silence that speaks louder than words, they step out into the village, the air grey and damp, the sky low with clouds that promise rain. Smoke rises thin from chimneys, curling into the mist. Children stand barefoot at the edge of the road, their eyes wide, their whispers carrying faintly as the pilgrims pass. Dogs bark once and fall silent, their heads tilted, their tails still. The villagers watch with cautious curiosity, their faces unreadable, their hands busy with the day's labor. The pilgrims bow their heads in quiet farewell and follow the road beyond the last cottage, their staffs striking steady against the stones. The land is open here, the fields wide and bare, the hedges bent low beneath the wind. The air smells of wet soil, sharp and fresh, the sound of crows harsh above. Their boots sink into mud, their cloaks heavy, their breath clouding in the chill. Yet the rhythm holds, the tap of wood, the drag of feet, the steady beat of breath. Step by step, mile by mile, they press forward. By mid-morning, the path crests a rise. The mist begins to lift, and from the hilltop the land spreads wide before them. Far in the distance, faint and hazy, towers rise above the horizon, their spires sharp against the pale sky. The sight stills them both. The older woman presses her hand to her chest, her eyes glistening, her lips moving in a whisper of prayer. The pilgrim grips his staff more tightly, his breath catching, not with exhaustion, but sudden weight of knowing that the shrine, long imagined, long prayed for, now lies within sight. The road winds downward, through meadows where sheep graze, their bells clinking faintly, through orchards heavy with fruit, the air sweet with ripeness. Villagers pause in their work to watch the travelers, their faces softening as they see the scallop shells upon their satchels. Some lift hands in blessing, some press bread into their palms, some only nod in silent recognition of the long road. Already carried. By afternoon, the towers grow larger, clearer, rising above walls of stone. The sound of bells drifts faintly across the fields, slow and solemn, calling not only the townsfolk but the pilgrims as well. The woman weeps softly as she walks, her face turned upward, her voice trembling with prayer. The pilgrim does not weep, but within him stirs a stillness deeper than silence, a peace shaped not by arrival but by the endless rhythm of the road that brought him here. Through the gate, as the sun begins to sink, the streets are alive with pilgrims from every land. Faces lined with dust, cloaks worn thin, staffs polished by countless miles. The press of bodies carries them forward, through narrow lanes, past inns crowded with voices, past merchants selling candles and tokens, until at last they stand before the cathedral. Its walls rise vast and solemn, its spires reaching into the darkening sky, its doors open wide. The sound of chanting drifts, and slow, a tide that pulls all who hear it. The pilgrims step inside. Candles blaze upon the altar, their flames trembling, their light casting gold upon the stone. Incense drifts in soft clouds, its scent heavy, clinging to every breath. Pilgrims kneel upon the worn floor, their foreheads pressed to the stone, their voices hushed, their prayers endless. The older woman sinks beside them, her body trembling, her face wet with tears. The pilgrim kneels too, resting his staff upon the ground, bowing his head low. His prayer is not of words, not of plea nor thanks, but of silence, of breath, of the long journey carried within him. The road does not end here. It never ends. For even as the candles flicker and the bells toll, even as the pilgrim bows his head in the hush of the holy place, he knows that the journey is not in reaching the shrine, but in every step that brought him to it, in every mile that lies still beyond. The pilgrimage is not a destination, but a rhythm, patient, eternal, like the rain upon the roof, like the breath in his chest, like the turning of the world itself.